All right, dead air. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Come on in, and as you come in, we'll wait a few minutes for everyone to get started. Let us know who you are and where you're calling in from. It's always a good thing. And set your panelist or set your chat to everyone, so you don't just send stuff to Kristin and I. Yeah, me too. Of course, you typed it right, and I did not. Okay, so quick fun question, while we're waiting for people to come in. So all of us at A2 and probably a lot of you are gearing up for ASA annual here in a couple weeks. And I think I heard this before, but I was just reminded today that 90s band TLC is playing this year for the opener. So we thought a fun question would be, who's your favorite act that you remember from a previous year's ASE, if you've been before? Or if you haven't, then just who's your favorite band or musical artist generally? Halifax. Hello. I wouldn't say these were my favorite, but I remember the Bacon Brothers from Salt Lake City a few years back. Lionel Richie, thank you, Dave. That's Rascal Flatts. Did they actually play at the conference, or was that just a big match in Dallas? Okay. All right, +1 for Lionel Richie. All right, what about you, Kristin? What you have a favorite from previous ASAE, or just your?
I haven't been to an ASAE yet. Overall, it's just like a broad range of anything. So
okay.
Do a lot of DJ stuff down in Miami, so probably a different audience.
Cool, yeah. John Legend was a good one. I do remember that one from Columbus as well. Okay, sort of about 2 after. Usually we give it another minute or so, but we got a lot to cover today, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in. This was one of our most popular webinars in terms of registrations, so have a huge turnout, and so looking forward to everyone's participation in the call today. So today's about executive dashboarding and building data stories, KPIs, things like that. This is for senior leadership, for boards, and also for staff, right? But a lot of times we're the ones putting the stuff together for those people. So when people want to know what we do at A2 and they want to know quickly, I usually include the word dashboards. Everyone understands what I mean, but it doesn't mean that they're easy to build, right? So that's kind of why we put this together. And judging by the turnout, I think it's a lot of you are thinking about similar things. So, okay, so I'm Bill. I'm Senior VP of Strategy and Solutions with Association Analytics, or A2. So we're the leader in analytics for associations, as you might expect. We're the developer of the Acumen Analytics platform and all of the complementary services that go with it, which include things like data quality, data governance, adoption services, coaching, things like that. And I'm very pleased to welcome an analytics enthusiast and KPI dashboard creator, Kristin Sanders. So Kristin, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, so I'm the Director of Data Analytics at the American Academy of PAs, and I've been there for over 9 years, and I'm excited to talk about KPI dashboards with you guys.
Awesome. Kristin, what is a PA for those of us that are?
The American Academy of Physician Associates. So we're the National Professional Society for Physician Associates or Physician Assistants, and there's 168,000 plus PAs.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, so we always like to do a what's next, and it's usually about an upcoming webinar. But this time we're going to say what's next is ASAE Annual. So we are sending a big team down. Would love to see any of you on the call join us in our booth, which is number 633. But it'll just be the big giant one with the tall thing that says Association Analytics. You will want to fill out the cards that correspond to our success crew, chance to win $10,000 in cash. So well worth your effort to do that. We have an amazing party. It's going to be at Wild Leap, Atlanta. So it's a brewery and a really awesome venue. I've not been to it yet, but all of our people that we know down in Atlanta have told us that it's a really great spot, and it's going to be a lot of fun there. All right. So there we go. Yeah, I was going to say, Pat, if you could drop in the link. I see you did that. So I appreciate it. So what's on the agenda for today? Intro and polls, as usual. We're going to do our audience poll. We're going to learn more about Kristin and about AAPA. Then we're going to jump into the executive dashboarding piece, right? We'll start with strategic goals and how to develop them, or at least how to represent them in your dashboards, how to build the dashboards actually, and then how to drive adoption, how to develop that data culture that we're always looking for, right? We'll do questions and comments throughout. I will prompt you, for your input, keep you paying attention, throughout, but also just want you to come in with questions, comments, success stories, really anything that is relevant to the conversation as we go along. Okay, and then we'll do pro tips and remaining questions at the end. So at that point, I'll put my feet on the desk and let Kristin wrap us up with those pro tips. All right, so the poll today is really just one of those kind of get to know you type of polls. So these will be quick. First one is, which best describes your position level? Okay, and I realize that these three aren't going to catch everybody, but just choose the one that's closest. Okay, awesome. So we got a lot of executives, a lot of senior and mid-level managers, and we got a bunch of staff that are, probably with the directors and the managers that are creating some of these kinds of dashboards. So, okay, let's go to our second one now, which is, which best describes your primary data role, right? So what I mean by that is, are you the person that receives data, from an analyst? Are you the one that creates it? So you're attending today to understand how to do that better, or maybe you're unsure, or maybe you just really have no relation to the data. So if you're answering none, and I see that there's a few people that are, would love to hear in the chat, what it is that you do, and is it because your organization generally is not working with data as much as it should, or is your role really like totally divorced from that? That would be surprising to me, and I would bet that we could connect your role to data in some way. All right, so yeah, so grab us, so let us know in the chat, especially if you, so 8%, right? That's said none. So if anybody that said none wants to jump in the chat and tell us about it, that would be great. And finally, just to get a sense for our audience, do you have a standard KPI dashboard? Yes or no? Okay, Michael's a consultant. Okay, I think that's a pretty important data role. I don't know if I would answer none if I was in. Not yet. Okay, great. Working on it. Yes, no, and sort of, right? I didn't really know how to characterize that third category, right? You're working on it. You wouldn't quite say it's complete yet, but at least it's something that's on the radar screen. Part of our AMS, yeah, that's pretty common. Working on that. Awesome. Okay, right. So we have 30%, almost 30% say yes, we have that standard KPI dashboard. So congratulations to you all. Around the same amount, 36% said no, and 37 are in the sorted category, right? So they're working on it. Kristin, any surprises there?
No, not at all. I feel like everyone's a little bit everywhere with it. So that makes sense and definitely helps tailor the conversation for the users.
Okay, awesome. Right. So we got I think a pretty good mix of executives and managers and staff. We have some consumers. We have a lot of creators, which is awesome. So I think both sides will get a lot out of today's conversation. And we have a lot that either don't have or that are working on their KPI dashboards. I bet that there is something valuable even for those that already have it. Okay, awesome. Let's, sorry, I forgot to share the results on that one. I'll give you a sec to take a look at that. All right. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and get into introducing more about Kristin and more about AAPA. So you told us a little bit about the Association of PAs, but anything to add, right, regarding mission or staff or anything like that?
So AAPA leads the profession and empowers our members to advance their careers and enhance patient health. And we do that through advocacy, CME, events, career resources, and more. We have over 73,000 members who are PAs, PA students, and pre-PAs, and a staff of 113.
Awesome. So one of the things that comes up a lot in our conversations with prospects is the personal side of this, right? So we always talk a lot about how it helps your organization, how it helps your department, but I think an overlooked part of getting comfortable with data and with communicating and telling stories with data, making data informed decisions, and all of that is how it can advance your careers, right? So tell us about where you started with your association and kind of your transition to where you are today.
Sure. So I joined AAPA over 9 years ago on the marketing team. My background is in digital marketing, and so I've always been really data-driven. I feel like all marketing teams are pretty data-driven because you need to show results. You need to see, are these tactics worth it? Are these investments worth it? And everything digital and even traditional nowadays is trackable. So I moved from measuring campaign-specific results where I was looking at conversions, tactics, and ROI. And then I moved to further advancing our analytics, tracking our user behavior, setting up campaign remarketing and suppression enhancement. So just continually improving upon how we're tracking people, how we're reaching them. And now my scope has been widened to the overall analytics of the company. And I oversee all data and streamline it to align with our strategic plan.
Awesome. Would you agree if I said that this data literacy and the communications with data was a key to that advancement?
Yeah, 100%. Data is very powerful and it can be really overwhelming. So the ability to connect the dots and break it down to the audience, giving them insight and driving interest about what does it mean for them, really put me as a subject matter expert position and continually brought me to the table for these strategic conversations.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something that we see a lot, right? Is that the when you get conversant, when you're able to collect the key data in meaningful ways, it naturally brings you into the fold with the executives. So, Kristin, we have a question asking about who you report to. I should have asked you that. Thank you, David.
Yeah, so I've transitioned a little bit. So I was in the marketing department, reporting to the VP of marketing. And then while I was there, as I was advancing things, I carved out a different position where I was the director of marketing intelligence and analytics. And now I'm reporting to the CIO and I've moved over to the IT team. So there's been a little bit of a transition across departments, but it just makes sense and it aligns that I'm not looking at marketing only, but across the whole org-wide information. So I'm over with the CIO and the IT team now.
Awesome. Okay, so if y'all have been to our webinars before, you know that we always talk about acumen a little bit, but not very much. So this will be like a I don't know, 30 to 60 second tangent about acumen. So I want to ask you, as Kristin is an acumen customer, so for the benefit of the group, just tell us a bit about how acumen's helped you along that journey.
Yeah, so acumen has helped fill two needs for AAPA. One is having these centralized dashboards. Staff have one place to go to access key dashboards, and they can use that as their source of truth. And the second one is visualizing AMS data. I'm sure we all know that AMS data can be such a bear. So the fact that we have daily syncs of visualized data, users can quickly go in and see how they're performing versus having to go and manually export this data, manipulate it, put it in different visualization tools or even Excel dashboards. So it's really helped get us quicker information in that regard. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks. And for those of you that don't know, Acumen is built on Microsoft Power BI. So I personally and A2 recommends Power BI if you're getting started. But Kristin, what other tools might people take a look at if they're looking for a dashboarding solution?
So we also use Tableau as well. We had Tableau before bringing in Acumen. We use that for ad hoc reports. And we also use Looker Studio, which was the Google Data Studio for website reporting.
All right, awesome. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that Looker is still free. And it's really good, for other things too, but in particular with web analytics data from Google. So, okay. So then let's transition into the meat of it. How are we going to build out these dashboards? And the first thing is the strategic goals, right? And the strategic goals are very often represented as pillars, by associations, which made me think of this photo that we have here. This my friend took this photo when we were at the Temple of Poseidon, and he had to drive it was almost 2-hour drive from Athens to get there, and we literally just drove there for the sunset, turned around and came back. But it was well worth it. And Chris had a good picture for the webinar today. So I want to ask you in the chat, most of you are probably somewhat familiar with your strategic plan, but what are some of the pillars in your plan? Just go ahead and just tell us a few. And while you're doing that, I'm going to discuss some of the ones that I see very often. So there's the easy ones, right? The operational type things, member value. Thank you, Andy. And some of those things are quite easy to measure. It's like, we want to grow this, right? We want to grow membership. We want to grow our, have more conversions with our students. Terry has no strategic plan, but that's another webinar for another day. But well, we have talked about that before. But what about things that are hard to measure, right? Be the voice of the industry. We want to advance the profession, right? We want to advance the mission. We want to strengthen our brand. These kinds of things. Value and advocacy, Michelle says. Impact of programs. Okay, that's a good one. Participation. All right, so all of these things are pillars, right? So you can imagine that there's this this building with the pillars out front, and each one represents one of the key things that the senior leadership team wants to grow. So networking, advocacy, innovation. That's a good one. Okay, so. Yeah, so Kristin is here with us, right? So now we're going to talk about what's going on with the AAPA strategic plan. And it wasn't entirely lucky, but they happen to represent theirs as pillars as well, right? So they have partnering with purpose, right? They have advancing the core, and they have building a movement. You can read some of the subtext there, but the point is like, these are like very lofty goals. The language is quite grand, and you might wonder how it is that you would possibly represent those in an executive dashboard. So we're going to talk about the specific KPIs later, but for now, Kristin, just generally, what's the process like for starting to translate this stuff into action?
So we assigned initiative champions for each pillar based on organizational work that falls into the pillar. And these champions create a plan for the year that outlines the overall effort, strategies, tactics, and timeline for implementing these.
All right. Yeah, see, there's some good stuff coming in the chat about pillars. I wonder if people are cutting and pasting these. Either you're like really eloquent and type fast, or you've cut and pasted those from your plan. Either way, they're good, right? They're things that we all want to do, but again, the language can sometimes trip us up, right, or not really readily translate into some of the things that we're used to seeing on our dashboards, especially if they're coming solely from the AMS. So so how did you choose then? What was the process like for actually choosing the KPIs?
So our KPIs are chosen based on a group of efforts where multiple departments collaborate. We wanted it to be something that not just one department was working on, and something where it's a team effort, it's a whole organizational plan and organizational effort. So we chose the KPIs based on that. So for example, we have some like partner benefit utilization, where we're tracking the percentage of users utilizing at least one benefit, as well as the typical dues revenue, non-dues revenue, and non-conference revenue as well.
Okay. Yeah, I like this benefit utilization. That's a good one. So considering there's like probably quite a scope of benefits, right? From something very small to something very large. Do you Did you attempt to like weight those in any way, or did you exclude some, or is it just like all the benefits are equal?
So we have defined them. We have categories of career partnerships, career benefits, CME benefits, member discounts, and we're looking at the number of users who are utilizing it and looking at the average number of users. So we are not weighting it, but looking at it compared to the percentage of membership that we have.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, again, conversation for another time, but when you think about benefit utilization and then your value proposition more generally, this is usually something we talk about in the engagement scoring webinars and conversations, but think about the relative value of those things, right, to your to your membership, right, to the idea of the exchange of value with your members. So okay. So one of the things that that I'm curious about are new KPIs, right? So your board or your senior leadership, they probably, and I think in your case they did, they had a pretty good idea of some of the things that they wanted initially, but as you start to discuss and you see what data is available, maybe some new things came up in the process. Is there an example you could talk about for something that was introduced and maybe why that was?
Yeah. So in 2023, we've introduced a new KPI for profile completeness. So once we had our Acumen dashboards established, we saw that we had key demographic areas that were blank. And also the marketing team knows that there's certain emails and addresses that are flagged as bad. So in order to reach our members or potential members and target content important to them, we identified 10 key demographic fields to improve data collection. We established a baseline percentage of members who have the key profile fields, and we do weight this one, for example. So this one is a weighted score here. And so we are having the goal to improve that by a certain percentage, knowing that it's never going to be perfect because you're never going to have 100% complete data. Stuff is always changing, but you can always be better than you were yesterday. So continual improvement is the goal.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really good one. Profile completeness is, if you're not tracking that, then I highly recommend it. If you've seen some of our stuff before, Reggie Henry has joined us many times, and one of the things that he talks about frequently is how they used to have dozens, hundreds even of data fields that they were constantly trying to keep updated. And what they basically did is they very deliberately went through a process of choosing which ones were really important. And I think 10 was their number as well. And they really focused on just improving quality and completeness for those. And they were basically willing to live with, some degree of inaccuracy in the others, right? For example, they stopped trying to keep track of your mailing address because, because they didn't mail anything, right? I mean, so they wanted to make sure that they had your cell phone and your email, but not necessarily your mailing address. No, so to answer your question, Robin, we're not showing KPIs right now. We're talking about the process of how we develop them, and then we're going to show the actual KPIs here in a bit. But thank you for the question. Okay, so that's actually a great segue. So now we're going to jump into the next phase, which is how do we put all this stuff together in a dashboard, right? So this section, I first had it titled dashboard design, right? But that design is really important. But I also want to focus on like building the dashboard, right? And a big part of that is how do you decide, what to measure and how to measure it, right? Because like you said, the executive team or the leadership team will very often tell you a lot of the things that they want on the dashboard, but sometimes they won't. And then, they use this lofty language that sounds great, but turning it into something that's actionable and measurable is sometimes difficult. So, made it into a bit of a game. So we're just going to take a quick detour. I want to ask everybody to participate, and it's just answer in the chat sort of a thing. But our game is called How Do You Measure That? Okay, and now, but this will just take a second. So we're going to go through some of those, how should I say, hard to define pillars, and talk about how we can measure some of these things, right? So first one is strengthen our brand. First pillar, we want to strengthen our brand. How do you measure that? A few of us mentioned that as one of our pillars, so would love to hear your input on how do you measure that. Name recognition survey, okay, great. visits to website, surveys, engagement scoring, brand awareness, name recognition, poll non-members. That's a good one. A lot of surveys, media mentions. Okay. Yeah, these are great. These are great. I had listed a few just in case we didn't get a lot of people answering this one, but I think you really covered it, right? I had social media, I had NPS, right, which is just a type of survey. I think web analytics is a good one, right? Look at the searches, the referrals on your site, non-member data for your events, maybe your partners, right? Exhibitors, sponsors, advertisers, things like that. Key messaging and comms, okay. What is a brand, Jim? Thank you, Terry. I was going to ask that. Okay, so while we're waiting to hear this, I don't think I can go on until I hear what a brand gym is. But Kristin, any comments on what you saw there? Anything that you would say that wasn't mentioned? I'm pretty satisfied with what came up.
Yeah, very similar. Everything as well. Yeah, direct traffic, brand polls. Yeah, surveys. Yep, everyone hit it. So.
All right, cool. Right. So strengthen our brand. It sounds hard to measure, but actually we all found it pretty easy. Okay, next pillar. What if we say we want to be the voice of our industry, right? I see that a lot, right? Is maybe it's worded exactly this way or something about thought leadership. So how do we measure that? Yeah, so Susan says measure strength or build strength. So building is maybe another thing. We're talking about measuring progress, right? To know if your initiatives to to build your brand are working or not, but they're closely related. Okay, citations, media, advocacy projects, outcomes, speaking engagement. Oh man, that was Dave. I was gonna say that was a really good one, but then it was Dave. He's our CMO, so of course he. Okay, media requests. Okay, so what I had a couple here. I don't know if there's any that weren't mentioned, but what do you think? I think we did good on this one too.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, for AAPA, our research department does a great survey, and we set that as our benchmarks. Then, as what does a PA look like? Where are they practicing? What is the salary survey? So we do a lot of specific stuff for our industry and our audience through research and advocacy.
Yeah. They were coming in pretty fast. So I don't know. Maybe somebody mentioned this, but I think a lot of our customers, and I bet that AAPA is one of them. You have like practice materials, right? So all of your members work in a similar professional setting. So you have some white papers or some practice guides and things like that, and you can look at downloads and engagement with that type of content, which tells you how you're doing, and look at that directionally if it improves over time. When you launch a new piece of content, right? Do you get a lot of eyeballs on that? Do you get a lot of downloads, things like that? And then some of our associations have consulting, right? So they have a service where members can call in, and then you might look at the frequency and the content of those types of requests, right? And that can tell you if you're doing a good job of being the voice of the industry or not. Okay. Last one, and then game's over. Sorry about that. We want to advance the profession. I think this is probably the hardest one, right? But a lot of us have that on our strategic plan, and we might have parts of our mission that are public facing, but if we're a professional association, advancing our specific profession is always something that we want to do. So how do you measure that? Okay. Abstract submissions. New professionals, right? Yeah. So this is increased recruitment, legislative wins, all good. Yeah. So this is an interesting one. So yeah, I'm going to actually I have a few thoughts, but I want to see what you think first, Kristin. How would you measure if you're successful in advancing the profession or not?
Yeah, this is actually one thing that we have looked at recently. We've actually engaged with the Harris poll to do a public awareness effort. And so we have polled and gotten survey results on that just to see how we are out there. Also, one thing that AAPA has been fortunate enough is that we have been continually in the top news for some top professions in the top one, top two profession in the medical industry. So that has also helped with advancing the profession, advocacy efforts and wins, as well as has been mentioned within here too.
Awesome. Yeah, so this is a few people mentioned, kind of generic industry, like publicly available data. I know a lot of our customers would do things like salary benchmark surveys and things like that. So you can monitor all of those things over time. Now, some of that public stuff is not necessarily directly attributable to the association, right? I mean, at least you can't really connect that up, but still directionally, it's really good. Certifications, I saw a lot of people, talked about that. I do think publications and journals, they're part thought leadership and part advancing the profession as well. If you have career centers, right, that you run or you're affiliated with, I think that's also, there's also can be some good data there. So, so the point is we have to figure out what we're going to measure and how we're going to do that. And a lot of that is based on, it's partly based being realistic on data availability, right? But part of that is abstracting, a level of granularity down from the strategic goals to the departmental goals, and then in a lot of cases, ultimately to our personal goals as well. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we make a dashboard out of all that? So a couple of tips. I'm just going to go through a few things really fast that we advise on generically. With Acumen, a lot of this stuff just comes out of the box. You don't necessarily have to build them. But if you are building them, then just a couple of really high-level tips, right? So integrate your data, compile it, wrangle it, even if it's in Excel. That's, it's tough. It's, it's a bear, I think was Kristin's term, right? Especially if you're having to extract that from your AMS. But as much as possible, you want to look at data from across different sources. But, if you're just starting out and you only look at each source independently, then that's also okay. I do advise using some kind of tool. If you're great with pivot tables, then bless you, but there are other easier ways to do that. Looker Studio is a good one. That one's free. We talked about Power BI and Tableau. There's Click Dimensions. There's a lot of tools at every level of complexity and every level of cost. Andrea says pivot tables are fun. Okay. Next is planning, right? And so we could do a whole webinar just on this, but I think the main thing about the planning is to be clear on the purpose and the audience, right? So don't create a really complex technical dashboard for an executive audience, right? Or a non-technical audience, and vice versa. So you'll see in a sec when we go to Kristin's dashboard, it's like really purpose-built for the audience that it was intended for. I do recommend documenting user stories, right? Especially if there are multiple audiences, right? So that, and you guys know how the format of the user story works. It's, as blank, right? This type of role, I need to do this because of this, right? And it's important to have not only the action, but the reason that I would want to take that action. Okay, definitive versus directional insights. So for those of you that have been on our webinars before, you've seen me talk about this, but basically the idea is definitive things need to be exactly correct, and it's like a point in time number. Directional insights is something that it's a trend, right? Are we doing better in this area, yes or no? And very often the exact number is not as important as the trend. And finally, design. Be deliberate with your color. Don't go overboard with fancy charts and things. There's a reason that line charts and bar charts are the most popular, right? Or even just KPI cards, right? Like a big number in bold print, in a green or red arrow, something like that is really intuitive. Everybody knows what that means, and it helps you to communicate. So less is more very often. Okay, so we're going to see now how Kristin can add to this, right? But generally speaking, you can build your dashboards in one of two ways. You can either summarize stuff that you already have, right? So if you have a tool like Acumen, building the dashboard is just pinning some things that you've already done into a summary dashboard, or you can also custom build it, and it helps to have some consolidated data for that as well. But if you're working with Excel or if you're working independently in Power BI or Looker, then you might be in the custom building camp. Right? This is kind of what it looks like if you're building it with, with things that already exist, right? So this is the Pulse dashboard inside Acumen. So you have membership data, you have events, etc., and you take the important pieces of that and you pin it, to a dashboard. So you have live tiles for all of the things that are important to you. But another way is to custom build it. So now we're going to take a look at the executive dashboard, or the KPI dashboard for AAPA, and we're going to look at all of these KPIs that Kristin has put together. But just right off the bat, really quick comment on this: the use of color is quite deliberate, right? I mean, so you have if you've accomplished it, it's blue. If you've not, it's red, right? I can clearly see that in about 3 seconds. It's really clear and intuitive. There's narrative explanation, so I don't have to necessarily interpret every single thing. That makes it responsive to the audience, right? And of course, less is more, right? So there's 9 KPIs, there's 9 boxes, and each one is clearly explained. So, any person that works in this business could get everything they need from this in a few minutes. So, okay. So Kristin, tell us about the KPIs and kind of how you connected those back to the pillars and the strategic plan that we looked at a few minutes ago.
Sure. So we created 9 KPIs that drive value to our members, the PA profession, and to the organization for each pillar. And so these change from year to year, depending on our priority initiatives. Some of the core ones will stay consistent throughout the 5-year plan, but there are a few that do change.
Okay. And as if on cue, I was just about to ask you, and Tim's coming in saying, who's the audience for this dashboard?
Yeah, so this dashboard is for our board of directors, our senior leadership, and our staff. So we have all levels of data literacy and levels of knowledge of each of these initiatives coming and accessing this.
All right. So tell me about the process for creating it. And did you do user stories? Did you go through like a lot of iterations to get here, and kind of tell us about that?
Yeah, so there were 5 key areas to organize all of the data for the implementation. The first one is nailing down the data sources. We needed to define and aggregate all data sources for each KPI and identifying what needed to be imported into Acumen and the level of detail needed to where most of the work was for us. Unfortunately, not all of our data sources could be integrated into Acumen. So this is a quarterly dashboard where half the numbers are already in our AMS and automated, and the other half are aggregated from other data sources. So my second point then is additional configuration and customization. Some metrics needed additional work built out in our AMS to tag and capture data for KPIs. So for example, the partner benefit utilization, we utilized a new field in our AMS, we set up a naming convention, and then we had to import that over to Acumen then as well, the new fields, which would bring us to my third point of new processes. So we would upload offline data submitted from partners and establish a timeline to submit the data. So there was external processes for our staff and then internal for IT then as well. My fourth area to organize is the external data. So since this is maintained also in Excel, in addition to what is already in our AMS, we have to continually add new data to it and maintain that. And then lastly, documentation is so important. So we have a master Excel, SOPs for data with calculations, measures that outline what our data sources are, our processes, our files, etc. So that was just getting the data into here. And then when we look at the layout now, we maintain the grid layout that the organization was familiar with. So AAPA is in the middle of our 2021 through 2025 strategic plan, and the KPI dashboard used to be in PowerPoint for 1.5 years before we moved it into Acumen. So this dashboard launched in July 2022, and Acumen was actually reintroduced to all of our staff in September 2022 with customizations to all of our modules. So our KPI dashboard was the first kind of launch back into Acumen. So our first launch in July, again, we kept the high level numbers, which is what everyone was familiar with seeing in PowerPoint. So it kind of has that PowerPoint look and feel to it. However, we brought it to life with tooltips on hover that would provide deeper information. So when someone would hover over one of these X's that you see, there would be a pop-up gauge graph that would show the percentage to goal, what the current KPI is, what the goal KPI is. So there was that enhancement that was here. My first goal was getting users, specifically senior leadership and board, familiar with the platform and tool. When we did our second iteration then with our next quarter, we dug into it further and we provided the drill down. So where you currently see anything that was underlined, and a new enhancement that we did is we created it like a hyperlink blue. So it was intuitive that it is a drill down. We drilled into further information because a lot of these numbers were previously derived in Excel charts and everything. What does make up this one kind of like ambiguous percentage or high level, right? When there's many components that create this. So we created that drill down so product owners would get additional level of detail and visualization through Power BI that they could utilize and be strategic about looking at, evaluating products and things like that. And then also it gave visibility if you weren't working on a specific KPI, it may be kind of ambiguous to you as well, but since it's available for all staff, everyone can go in and look and explore it and just learn more and get more familiar with all KPIs overall.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Tim asked, and I was asking about the audiences that would be the consumers of this data, but you have, right? So you basically have the three pillars, but then you have like and those are the columns, but you have the rows, which are like also three different audiences. So talk a little bit about how those are split up and why.
Yeah, so we wanted to drive value for our members since we are an association. So for our PAs, and we have, memberships. So we wanted to show where we're driving value for members, also where we're driving value across the profession, because you don't have to be a member for our advocacy efforts, for our branding efforts, for some of our different areas like that. So we outlined 3 specific KPIs specific to the overall profession as a whole. And then of course, at the end of the day, for our organization, we need to see that the revenue, the non-revenue, the financial information, as well as other key new initiatives. So that's how we divided it out. So we're checking all the boxes, if you will, for all of our different external audiences then as well.
Awesome. And what is OTP plus? What does that mean for us?
Yes, optimal team practice, which is something specific to our industry and to PAs. So that is some advocacy legislature that they're working on.
Awesome, right? And so for those of you that thought it would be difficult to measure advancing the profession, some good examples here. OTP plus is obviously quite specific, but I think most professional associations have some similar types of initiatives that they have that are specific to their organization. So, okay, so I wanted to dive in a little bit to, as much as I would like to say that, once you sign on with Acumen, it's just turnkey and everything, works like magic. You guys have Acumen, but you're still using Excel, right? You still have some data that exists outside that you are, that you're compiling for your dashboard. So, tell us about that again, just really quick. Is that difficult? Is it what's the process around that?
Yeah, it's difficult when you're trying to, of course, everything's testing, right? When it's something new, you're going to be testing how you're putting it in. Once you get that process, you get it streamlined, then okay, I have to, fulfill this information in this specific way within the spreadsheet. You can upload the offline data, the external data, and marry it into your AMS information that is within Acumen. So it was a process. It is a process still with some of the manual, because unfortunately not everything was able to be integrated at the level of detail that we needed from some of the external, vendors that we use. So it is a process, right? You're never going to get rid of Excel completely. So it's always going to be there in some capacity. But that's where definitely definitions and documentation of everything is just so important, to make sure that you're consistently doing things in the same way, because you are going to be updating this on a quarterly basis, on a yearly basis. And so also just having everything documented within the module. So you're only seeing one page, but this is actually 8+ pages of our KPI module, because we want to make sure that everything is defined. So the strategic plan is completely within there. So anyone who accesses the module should be able to understand the plan, the goals, the definitions, the metrics, etc. So that way everyone's just aware of what the overall goal is and how we're getting there and how we're achieving it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. So didn't really plan on this, but just a very quick detour. So we see the KPI module is highlighted, right? So that's clearly what we're looking at here. But just to the extent that it's not obvious, right, by the name of the tab, what kinds of things are are stored in you know, under the other tabs, and who are the audiences for those, just to, right? I mean, the executive dashboard is like the, you know, the key piece, right? But there are, you know, other dashboards here and for other audiences things. So just, you know, very briefly tell us about that.
Yeah, so we utilize Acumen a little bit differently than probably many associations do. We have a very data savvy team, so we have customized all of our Acumen dashboards. We've disabled the linking navigation in Acumen at the very top that would go to the default module. So we've created our own navigation at the top here. So someone could jump over to our customer care module, our huddle, which is our community. We just named it huddle, right? So it's easy for users, membership and sales. So these are at this point in time, at the end of 2022, the active modules that we had, but we have additional ones and we continue to create more.
Awesome. Okay, so there was a question in the Q&A, and I'll answer this quickly. It says, what role does association analytics play in identifying data sources and pulling data? So I'll take the second part first. So pulling the data, we have quite an active role, right? So the integrations with the source systems are, for the most part, out of the box. There is configuration that has to be done with each one. In particular, if it's an AMS or membership modules are pretty, you know, can be pretty time consuming. But for the most part, it's an out of the box integration, and that brings the data from your source systems into the Acumen platform, where we then have a bunch of out of the box visualizations, or very often, I would say more and more often, you know, some of our more advanced customers are choosing to customize and create some of their own stuff. So that's how we pull the data. Identifying the data sources is more of a collaborative, because we kind of handle all of that, but the identifying the data sources is more collaborative, and it's, you know, it does flow down from your, you know, strategic plan in a lot of ways, but it's basically about the goals of the analytics team. So it's definitely going to be your mission critical systems, right? Your AMS, right? If you have a marketing or a learning management system, it's usually going to have those. But beyond the community, right? Those are the top four. And then beyond that, it's a business decision about whether, you know, whether you want us to build and manage that integration, or if you want to bring it in yourself, which is more and more customers are electing to do that. Okay, so before we move off of this and move to adoption and culture and all of that, tell me, just describe the impact of all of this, right? I mean, the kind of like the before, the during, and then, like, you know, where things are now.
So we definitely have more frequent access to KPI metrics. This was previously maybe one time, maybe twice a year, we would pull all this information together for a mid-year and end-of-year report, and now it's quarterly. So some information, like I said, is already within the system. Someone in the chat asked how often we update. Some things are updated monthly on the back end, because it does feed into other modules. For example, like the partner benefit, that does feed into our sales module as well. That is something that we did build out the products within our AMS to be able to tag them and view them differently. So we're tracking them in our sales and then also within our KPI. So once we have it within our AMS system, we're able to utilize it in different dashboards. But overall, this is all done on a quarterly basis, which is much more frequently than what we had before. Also, we have the additional insight now that we have the drill downs that have been built out. So we're able to see more details about these different partner benefits, about these OTP areas, grassroots and engagement as well. So all of these different drill downs have maybe, you know, month of the year, or just overall, like what comprised this one number. So we're able to see that. And again, also just having it available. So maybe you weren't directly contributing to one, so it might be kind of vague to you and fluffy. Like, what is this, you know, pie in the sky number? You can actually drill down and see what these numbers are and what the teams are contributing to. So with all of that, we've actually gotten a lot of input from staff then for metrics, either wanting to add or revise. There's been a lot of excitement in here, inspiration to track things. It's also probably like a silver lining is we got a lot of data cleanup then as well, because as we know, there's so many areas that could use so much cleanup, but once it became a focus that we regularly needed to access and to update, it did improve our tracking then across the board for many areas of our organization.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so before we move off this, are there any specific comments or general comments really about the specific KPIs that we're looking at here? Any of them particularly useful or insightful or difficult to track, anything like that? Because I'm looking at some of these are quite usual, right? We want to look at our non-dues, our conference revenue, right? The kind of the bottom row. We talked about the OTP plus. So when you say introduced and enacted, is that those are our programs or bills?
Those are, state legislations and regulations. So exactly what has been introduced in the different states and then what has been enacted.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. And do you ask your members to take certain actions in order to get those legislation enacted?
Yeah, the advocacy team does reach out to their different constituents, depending on what state is it, what area it is. So they are very active and working together with their people within the different states and areas.
Awesome. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then tell us about attendee satisfaction at your conference. How do you get that data?
Our research team does a survey at the end of conference every year, and so we want to achieve X% and have X rating on the attendee satisfaction, and so we've continued to achieve that, which has been great.
Awesome. How many and you have that for several years, so you can actually look at the trend, see if you're getting better.
Oh yes, we have that for maybe 10 or more years. We've had that from the beginning of conferences, I believe. So we've had quite a few years. Yeah,
that's great. So I mean, a lot of times we see that, and probably some of us on here are doing that, is taking an attendee survey and then looking at it after the meeting and maybe having a 30-minute postmortem or an hour postmortem, and then it goes on a shelf, and then you don't really look at it again maybe until the next year, if ever. So this is really good. If you are doing satisfaction, keeping that in a central place, trending it over time is obviously, that's a really good idea. So okay, reach out to Kristin if you have any questions about this dashboard. So we'll move off of that now. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about in the last few minutes or so is how do we get adoption, right? How do we build that data culture that we want? So in the chat, if your association has done something that you feel like is a best practice, right? You've had some success in driving adoption or generally sort of advancing this data culture, that you're proud of. Tell us about what you've done in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to ask Kristin to tell us about their journey, and we'll start with this. So I think it's clear that your team was already quite data savvy, right? They were a little bit more data oriented or data literate than many of us are starting from. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, definitely speaking, back from my roots in marketing, again, I feel like a lot of marketing teams are very data savvy, and our team is definitely attuned to how their marketing efforts are impacting membership and sales. And then we also have very data-driven departments as well with our membership, education, and meetings. They all have key organizational data that they track. Our leadership is great. They're all data-driven. They champion and encourage staff to be involved in modules and to learn more about them. So it really was a big win for us to get it all in Acumen, or almost all of it, right, to continue to improve and get it into one centralized place for us, for everyone to access and have.
All right. And so how did you, so a big part of this is like promotion internally, mm-hmm. right? So you start a new program, it's like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. It's something new that I have to learn. So how was your marketing background helpful for, internal promotion of this program?
Yeah. So anything new can be scary or intimidating, especially with data. There are some people that do not want to see numbers or the line charts, like their eyes, go blank. So just like with marketing, you got to know your target audience and adjust the use case or your pitch for them. How is it benefiting them? How can they use it? How does it correlate back to the organizational goals? So the biggest part is really education. How can they use the system? What's in the system? What's not in the system? They just have to become comfortable and familiar with it. And that did require, and it still does, holding people's hands and walking through the use cases, because you're also going to learn how your users are using it. And you may find out, oh my gosh, there's a light bulb moment for both you and them. Oh, I got to go tweak this so that way this person can get to this metric quicker. Or they may not know that this is already within there. They just may have to apply a few filters. So it's a great learning part for both you and for your users as well.
Awesome. So some of our customers report that it's like getting people to use the tools that they put in place is difficult. So I just want to ask, tell us about like success or any lessons that you have around going beyond the executive dashboards or the KPI dashboards that we looked at. What kind of experience have you had with getting other staff to use and explore the data more?
Yeah, so we had a 150% increase of AAPA staff utilizing Acumen in 2022 compared to the previous year. And that really was brought, I think, with the KPI dashboard, because as you saw, we have other core modules like membership and sales, but unless you're actively on the membership team or maybe having a product, you may not access the platform overall. So by getting that one module that, again, every department touches in one way or another within there, we really drove people to the platform. And as well, I mentioned that we customize all of our modules. Since we are a data savvy team, they were looking for certain metrics that they maybe have to pull on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. And so we did go through and we customized everything. I will never forget someone had, when I was trying to onboard and, promote our out of the box stuff, which was great. It's great visuals that are there, really get you thinking about certain things. And someone said, well, who is this for? Is this for senior leadership or is this for me? Is this going to make my life easier on a daily basis? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my priority to get this customization work done and get this in their hands so they're not going through and manually doing X, Y, Z. And now that we've done that, our data savvy teams are digging into dashboards, using them to change programs. Our community, they are updating products and evaluating them and facilitating different interviews that they do with PAs as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everybody in the chat for your suggestions. See some good ones in there. Identifying power users, training, of course. Lena, I would love to know what's on your cheat sheet for the staff. That one had me intrigued a little bit. Okay, so we're going to go to pro tips, right? But as we transition to that, what are you? Just talk about some of the tricks, right? What are some tricks to get broader adoption?
So we meet regularly with the core data users to get teams comfortable with modules. Again, listening to their challenges. You may have a solution that would make someone's life 100 times easier if they didn't know that there was a filter, or maybe you can go through and tweak something like I said. So understanding how they're using it, and then they can report back key takeaways to their team. We've also established a Microsoft Teams team within our company. So when new updates happen and launch, we're able to blast that out to everyone and they know, oh, go check out this module or this update happened. So it's not something that's just living in the back end and they would have to go in and stumble upon. And we also brought forth gamification as well with some of our monthly staff emails. I would ask a guided question that anyone in staff may be interested in. So for example, in the sales module, what career or top users of LMS products in 2022? So that would guide the user. They would have to go to the sales module, go to the demographics, go apply whatever filters, and then they get curious, right? There's so many rabbit holes that you can dig down and people would want to explore more. So that did help drive people over to the platform to learn more as well.
Awesome. Okay, so pro tips, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna actually ask you to start with the last one, right? Because we know about starting simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked a lot about how you need to, organize your data and like wrangle it, and the better you do with that, the better your dashboards are going to be, for sure, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But talk about this collaborate. This is an interesting one for me, and I think it's not many people think about it this way.
I found that to be so important because when people feel like they own something or there's something in it for them, they're more engaged. This is not top-down driven, like all input is invited and it's all needed and everyone needs to work together, right? Especially for these KPIs. We're making it applicable for everyone. So every department has their hand in this and it really is an org-wide effort for us. So it's so important to have that collaboration and that active back and forth dialogue. Oh, this isn't working for me. Are you sure? It keeps it moving forward always, for sure.
So this one, and I promise everybody, this is, we've not discussed this before. So if you don't know the answer, then don't feel bad. But so you're in a kind of a unique position, not unique, but a good position in the sense that you said there was a lot of data literacy and senior leadership was really on board with this. But I would expect that many of the creators and the managers and directors that answered earlier are in a position of trying to push some of this stuff kind of upward in the organization, right? In your case, mm-hmm. it really was top down, which is the way it should be. But do you think that, or do you have any advice for those that would be in a position of going from, not from the bottom, but from the middle up, I would say?
Yeah, like trying to get a platform, do you mean? Like in that regard? Yes, definitely. When you think about how quickly you could get the data, right? Like now we're doing it quarterly again, that's our limitation. There is some of the stuff is available monthly, but it's much more frequently. So you're able to be engaged and be able to, pivot things if needed, but also knowing that, things do adjust sometimes. So, having that understanding there, but definitely it's so much easier to see that information more than once or twice a year and digging in and understanding more information. So by showing them the value in it, not only in like how we're tracking, but staff's time as well, it's so much more efficient for staff to be looking at these visuals and using their brain to, try and figure out like how to improve upon something or, to analyze a product or a service versus just like going through the Excel stuff and doing some of that, busy work, if you will. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, listen, that was amazing. We're right at 4 o'clock here, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. If you want to take a look at Acumen, get a jump start on some of this stuff, you can do that. We're happy to talk to you. It's just, it's not necessarily the end of the road if you do that, right? There's a lot of work that you can do on top of that, as Kristin's organization has demonstrated. So there's a link in the chat. And of course, one more reminder, if you're going to ASA Annual, you will regret it if you don't join our raffle and come see us at our party. So with that, I want to extend another warm thank you to Kristin. It was really awesome of you to join us. I actually learned a lot, even though we've already talked about this before, and hope all of you did too. And look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.